Hey guys, this is Mike and welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Nancy Luna, who is the restaurant tech correspondent for Insider. Like us here at The Spoon, Nancy's been seeing some of the struggles companies have been having lately. She covered and broke the news of Nextbite's layoffs, and she's covered some of the other stories as well. And so I thought I would have Nancy on and maybe we could compare notes and see if we can identify some trends that are happening in the space. Certainly, 2+ years after the onset of the pandemic, there's been a huge amount of change, a lot of capital flowing in, and I think we're seeing some interesting things happen now as the economy has a little bit of a dark cloud over it. And so we talk about all that, some of the latest stories she's written about and some of the ones we've covered. So it was a really fun conversation. I know I've really been enjoying having fellow journalists on the podcast and just discussing what we're seeing. So I hope you enjoyed this one. As always, if you want to get more Spoon podcasts, you can find it at the regular places like Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or just go to The Spoon. All right, that's it for now. Let's get to my conversation with Nancy Luna. All right, well, I'm really excited to be here today with Nancy Luna, correspondent for restaurant, food tech, and maybe some other stuff at Business Insider. Oh, do you guys call it Insider or Business Insider? I can never tell.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, when I first arrived, first of all, Michael, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
When I started at Insider in December 2020, and it was Business Insider, and I think that's how most people refer to it and think of it. I think a lot of people even say BI, but technically our parent company name and the name of the publication is Insider, because we cover a lot more than just business news. But of course, business news is where we all geek out, right?
Yeah, business and tech. And for us, food tech in particular.
Yeah.
And, it's funny, like I'm old school. I remember Business Insider from the days when Henry Blodgett still wrote. So I used to work at a competitor of Business Insider called GigaOM, which was a large venture-funded tech blog. And we were competing with TechCrunch and Business Insider. And I remember Henry Blodgett writing about him going into an Apple store to get an iPhone. I don't think he writes anymore for the the publication, but
no, but he still, talks about those days and how really that is sort of the heart and soul of what we do. Our mission is to tell the reader, be the insider, right? And tell them what they may want to know and delight them along the way. By giving them information that hopefully they want to know about. And that's especially what I do with the food tech stories, hopefully trying to give people an inside look at what's happening in this wild ride that's happening right now. But really, it's been like this for a while. I've been covering technology since I was at Nation's Restaurant News, 4 years ago.
You've been a long time journalist, right? This is not your first stop. You were at a couple pubs before this.
Yeah. So I started my career at the Orange County Register in Southern California, where I live, and been a business writer since 2003 and been a food and restaurant writer since 2005. I covered fast food from the very beginning. I live in Orange County, so it's home to Taco Bell, Del Taco, In-N-Out, all these major restaurant chains. So really enjoyed covering those chains. Even, McDonald's, there's 100 McDonald's in Orange County alone. So yeah. And then I sort of veered into I started covering delivery when Postmates first came into California, early on, and DoorDash, and took that knowledge when I went to Nation's Restaurant News in 2018 and created a column out of it called Tech Tracker. And really started getting into the nuances of online ordering, even, to POS systems, just everything that powers the restaurant industry, which set me up well when the pandemic hit, because I kind of knew exactly what was happening. And as you know, we've seen such an acceleration in the use of technology.
Yeah. And so much, I think, of what happens in restaurants, partly because I think a lot of the companies are based there, but because California oftentimes is just a leader, a lot of the early trials happen there. I think food robotics is kind of the epicenter, is in LA, broader kind of LA metro area. So much happens there. It just seems like a lot of the first things happen there.
Yeah, it definitely is a testing ground for the fast casual chains, a lot of restaurant chains that maybe are out in the East Coast tend to want to come and set up shop in Orange County, with the exception of Shake Shack. I mean, I'm kind of insulted that, they're working that they are in LA, they are in San Diego, but somehow
What
they
is
haven't
up?
made their way into Orange County. But, I digress. But yes, there is a lot of testing going in and around the Orange County, LA area, especially of robotics. El Pollo Loco is testing drones. And then we have the Coco and Serve delivery rovers, sidewalk robots in LA.
Yeah.
I've never seen them in action, but I've seen them at conferences up close, and it's fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Up here in Seattle, I'll just be driving down the street and I'll see like an Amazon delivery sidewalk robot stuck on the side of the road. Like there's one 7-Eleven in particular, they were just kind of running it back and forth. And then one day I just saw one sitting on someone's front lawn. So we see the Amazon stuff up here.
It wasn't, I hope it wasn't on its side or something.
It had a flashing red light.
Like a turtle
I think
on its shell.
It wasn't distressed. It had like a flashing red light. I'm like, if I wasn't going somewhere, I would have stopped and investigated. But that's that. And what we're really here to talk about today is restaurant tech, and that could include some robotics. One thing that I've seen from your work, Nancy, is you're breaking a lot of stories on restaurant tech. And in particular, in the last couple months, as we've seen 2022, the dark clouds of maybe an economic slowdown hovering overneath, and also coming a little bit out of the pandemic and things normalizing a bit. There's been some things happening with regards to restaurant tech startups, some layoffs, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think one point I want to start with is, why not? This is a story you wrote today about Sunday, a company called Sunday. They did the QR code checkout and payout system. They raised a ton of money, and then now they're laying people off. What's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like everybody else in this space, they was very well funded and then grew rapidly. They grew rapidly, but yet haven't figured out the profitability part, and so investors want to see profits over scale right now, and so they're pulling out of 4 out of 7 of their markets. So it's kind of a stunning collapse, just in the sense that they raised over $120 million in less than a year, and then pulling back so quickly. But they're still moving on. I mean, they say they're developing technology for rewards, a program. So, we'll see. But the problem is, there's a lot of other technology that that is already in the space, and I named them in the article. If they're doing rewards, there's Thanks, there's Punch. So, yeah, and even when they started here in the U.S., they were already behind because QR codes were already here. The founders are restaurateurs in France, and so they started the QR codes internally in their restaurants during the pandemic, and then it was wildly successful there from what I understand. And so they decided, hey, we're going to expand and bring it out, outside of Europe. And so they came to the US last year and raised a bunch of money. But I think it's been hard, from what I understand, for them to compete. I think they want to grow rapidly and get restaurants to adopt quickly. But, restaurants here are slow to adopt technology. They want to test things out. So I think they weren't able to get restaurants to adapt fast, in their time scale.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of European companies try to do U.S. North American market entries, and oftentimes with fairly large funding rounds. And this is a little bit space adjacent, but I could probably name 2 or 3 of the fast grocery delivery guys, like Joker, Gorillas, and I've certainly seen a pullback in that space. Like that is another space where seen a monumental at market entries, and then people pulling back fairly quickly.
Oh, for sure. I think we've been writing about the ultra fast space for now over a year, and it's collapsing as fast as it ramped up. I mean, at one point, I think we had chronicled, 6 or 7 players, including DoorDash in New York City, getting into the 15-minute space. But then even in December, before the year was out last year, we had 15-20 exit. And then, of course, Bike and Fridge No More went in March. A lot of that was related to their ties to finances in Russia and the Ukrainian war. But still, we had heard things weren't very pretty to begin with this type of ultra fast platform. So we'll see. Yeah, that's still going to be there's still going to be a lot of shakeout, I think, on that. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago questioning the entire premise of the space, right? I mean, I think a lot of the investment or some of the rationale for the investment was driven by, hey, we're in a pandemic, people want stuff delivered. But when they're going into dense urban environments and they're doing really hyper local points of presence in dark stores to kind of get to people quickly, because you have the clock's ticking, the order comes in, you have to get there in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But if you're in a dense urban environment, you may just be down the road from a 7-Eleven or, some sort of store. And then, by the way, you're competing ultimately with Amazon and Walmart, who they may take a little longer, but they're basically like UPS. They have huge logistics networks. So yeah. I just never saw the rationale necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, and in New York City in particular, they're competing with the local bodegas. And I think actually today there might have been a bill introduced to try and level the playing field for, these ultra fast, because I know some of the council members there feel like they've been able to open up but yet with permitting and licensing that, was a little bit lighter, than what bodegas have to sign up for. So yeah. And even just the dangerous part, like they really don't like the marketing of 10, 15-minute delivery, because that, then you see these gig workers on bikes. Some of them are gigs, some of them are I think W-2 workers, but regardless, they're rushed to get on their electric bikes and get to where they're going, which could lead to, accidents.
Yeah. Yeah. Back on the QR code space, I mean, we did see Bebot get acquired by DoorDash. So there has been some companies that have been successful and have had exits. I do think there does seem like a lot of the restaurants went towards contactless, pay at the table at the pandemic. But like you're saying, it's a slow evaluation cycle for the bigger chains in particular, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you get at the corporate level at a large, franchise, even a large, franchisee with multiple units, that they're not going to just buy something after a month, and it makes such a big investment. They want to test it. They want to look at competitors. It's just a slower adoption. I think you saw, that happen with Reef. They couldn't expand fast enough and get enough brands on board fast enough, or if they did, they couldn't get the permits fast enough. And so then they were opening without permits in cities just to get the scale. So yeah, everything is not happening fast enough. I think that's the thread and the theme with some of these folks.
I drive down southbound on Aurora in Seattle, and along the way as we're heading towards downtown, there's what looks like an abandoned Reef, basically mobile. What are those mobile home carts, whatever they're called? Yeah, it doesn't look like anyone. I think there may be graffiti on it. I think Reef's kind of a unique case that's kind of endemic to them, right? There's been a broader pullback, but I think Reef is maybe a unique case.
Yeah, right, because there's not too many folks out there with food trailers acting as ghost kitchens when you're talking about the larger ghost kitchen space. Most of the ghost kitchens are within existing kitchens, like in restaurants, and or they are in large facilities, chopped up with different smaller kitchens, and it's like the Rent a Kitchen, Kitchen United, or Cloud Kitchens concept. So yeah, it's a great idea, right? Like, let's get closer, to the consumer by parking a trailer closer to them for delivery only.
It's pretty far afield from their original concept, right? Originally Reef was this parking garage company, right? They bought a bunch of parking garages and said, "Hey, we want to build a bunch like little centers of activity and commerce." Yeah. And then, so I always felt like the trailer thing was interesting, but it wasn't kind of part of the original plan. It felt like.
Yeah, I mean, in LA, it just depends on where they are and where they're expanded to. And what they soon found out was where they didn't have parking lots. And remember, you can't put these trailers in garages because
Yeah.
we're dealing with propane, and becomes like a bomb situation.
Yeah.
But they in LA they are actually in parking lots, so I've observed them. But in some other cases that I've reported, I had managers tell me that their trailers were at U-Haul lots behind gates, and it was hard for the delivery drivers to find them, and it was just they were in the not so great neighborhoods as well. And so they were putting them in these like very wherever they could find and lease parking space so that they could in a city. And sometimes those weren't very desirable locations, especially for the staff who were, working at them.
And you do say it is a good idea, right? At some level, it's like, hey, let's put these distributed like pop-up instant kitchens in places. But they expanded pretty quickly, and you've reported on some of the problems I had. I think it was David Chang had an affiliation with Reef. At some point, he basically said no because of the food code violations. I think you reported on that, right?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, way back in December, we had exposed all of the numerous complaints that were coming in from consumers about getting delivered like raw chicken and a lot of raw proteins from many of their brands, not just David Chang's Fuku. They have their own virtual brands. Like they had a lot of chicken wing concepts and everything. And yes, so David Chang pulled his partnership with Reef, and I think he is working with Kitchen United now. When
you look at Reef, they're not certainly the only ghost kitchen concept that has had trouble. I think Insider and others have wrote and TechCrunch have reported on Butler, a ghost kitchen startup, so that basically managed and did turnkey delivery to hotels, and they basically shut down very recently. And while NextBite isn't necessarily a ghost kitchen concept, I think that I would call them more of a virtual brand concept.
Yeah,
they basically they spin up restaurant concepts, and then they work with existing restaurant and kitchen owners to basically use their unused capacity to roll out and help them find business essentially. And it's an interesting company because it was started by a scion, third generation Alex Cantor of the famous Cantor's Deli, and they started as Ordermark, which I think was a tech play to basically help restaurants create a dashboard, a way to manage all the different point of order systems or food delivery systems. Yeah. And then at some point they decided to do an extra spin out company called NextBite. And I think that was growing fast enough where they basically went all in and renamed the entire company NextBite. So I was surprised because it seems from an outward perspective, just looking as an observer, things seem to be going pretty well for NextBite. They've been raising money quickly. And then your story came in that they were doing some layoffs. I think you reported that last week.
Yes, we reported that over the weekend when we had heard, got the tip late Friday that they laid off, and we still don't know an undetermined amount of people. Some sources say it was quite a lot in the division, and yes, they did it on Friday. We don't know how many, but yeah, and apparently it was the second round of layoffs. I think they had another one in April. So. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like with Reef and some of these other very, well-funded food tech companies that are now struggling, even GoPuff announced this week, that they were doing layoffs and restructuring. It is that they grew wildly fast, and they're now pulling back and focusing on either core strategies that work or core markets where profitability is attainable. I think on NextBite, they told me, Alex Cantor said that he would be still focusing in on both the virtual brand side of the company and the Ordermark side of the company, which is the technology part. But, things change really quickly. I mean, Ordermark was revolutionary at the time when Alex co-created it, as a problem solve for Cantor's Deli. He solved a major pain point, the Tangled counter of tablets dedicated for delivery. He put it into one tablet. It was, genius. Other people were, he was a first mover on that. And so that's part of the reason why I think SoftBank, led a huge round for them a couple of years ago, because SoftBank loves disruptors. But, as you and I know, both being first in technology doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the strongest and last the longest, because it's tech, right? So there's going to be other people who come in and they might do it better. And so we know that like Olo provides that kind of service, for restaurants as well. They aggregate the digital orders through the POS, and I think Lunchbox does it as well. So, but Cantor says he's going to still focus in on the tech side and the virtual brand side. On the virtual brand side, I can, they are bringing in Denny Marie Post, a veteran, restaurant CEO to
Red Robin, right?
From Red Robin. She can come in. She has that knowledge with working with restaurants that maybe Alex doesn't. And so maybe, I don't know what the problem is. They didn't really say it in their statement, but I mean, obviously it's probably getting enough scale, right? To, where these restaurants, Alex always says he believes that there's this extra capacity in every restaurant, that we don't really need ghost kitchens, right? Because there's extra capacity within restaurants. But maybe restaurants are starting to get busy. Yeah. Maybe
I like that. I like the idea, right? It's less capital intensive seemingly than like what you're talking about with like a Reef or even a Kitchen United, where they're facilities based. And I've always loved the story of Alex, like the coming out of Cantor's Deli, but like you said, things changed. They're bringing in professional manager, and you're starting to see that a little bit of that elsewhere, right? People are starting to bring in professional managers who maybe they're installed by the investors or whatever, but like, that it's time to get serious. People are more focused on bottom line, and they're getting a shorter leash.
Yeah. And that's just kind of the theme of the moment right now is profits over scale. So I think that's essentially what's happening. But what specifically, what part of the business, I would just be guessing on what's happening with Nextbite. But I do believe there are a lot of there's thousands of virtual brands. We do know this, right? I think Uber Eats told me just globally on their platform alone, they have like 20,000 virtual brands. So that's just one delivery operator. And obviously there's some overlap with DoorDash and
It reminds me of the early days of the internet, where there's just so much competition for like a lot of the same business. I just wonder, like, when you go on a DoorDash or you go on an Uber Eats and there's endless amounts of names. It does seem like you need to somehow stand out from the crowd, and maybe that involves like getting like a celebrity or like a famous chef or whatever.
Yeah.
But it really is hard to compete. And I did a story, I think it was yesterday, about how successful Wonder is doing in their New Jersey market. I think you told me you read a little bit about them. You haven't reported on them, but it's a company that's raised almost $1 billion, founded by a guy who founded Jet.com, Mark Lohr. And I was like, it's an eye-popping amount of capital. And what's crazy is Wonder is just really serving one metro market, basically New Jersey.
Yeah.
And they've raised $1 billion. They have this idea where they're going to do centralized food production and then have like delivery vans that actually cook at the curb. It sounds a little bit like Zoom.
I was going to say it reminds me a little bit about Cluster Truck. I don't know if you've written about them, but I have, and I think the key there, if there is some profit to be made with his model, and again, I haven't interviewed anybody at Wonder, and I've just read about it. But it sounds like anything that's like Cluster Truck is vertically integrated, right? So like if you own, everything, if you cook the food and you control the whole process, there's money to be made with that. The problem with the ghost kitchens is like you got to divide a pie that is already very small with like 2 or 3 different people, and how do you make money out of that?
Yeah, vertical integration is an important part of the story. Also, it seems like the success is around consumer embracement of the service is really, really high. Like what I've heard anecdotally is people are using it multiple times a week. They're seeing the vans roll around the city. And what they like is they're able to get food from chefs. So what they've done is done deals with like high profile chefs that are in New York or LA. Yeah. So people are excited about ordering from these chefs. So kind of getting back to the virtual kitchen concept, if you don't have like a brand name associated with it, I think oftentimes it just gets lost in the shuffle. And I think part of the reason Wonder's successful is they've done some of these deals with high profile chefs who have worked on the actual menus. It's not just a pure licensing deal.
Yeah, and that's why, Hungry House is doing something similar in New York City. I've actually visited that Ghost Kitchen. She likes to not call herself. She's like the anti-ghost kitchen because it's actually a walk-up that has kiosks you can order. But she,
Kristen, and they have seasons,
owner,
right?
Kristen, yeah, and they have chef influencers who already have like a well-known following on social media, but don't necessarily have like a restaurant to boast of. But they know their flavors and they have a following, and so she's giving them that sort of brick and mortar space through Hungry House. And the beauty of it is that she has done what a lot of other ghost kitchens have kind of been pivoting. I hate to use that word pivot, but shifting into maybe sort of this hybrid model or virtual food hall. A lot of people like to call themselves, where it's not just a delivery only product. It is pickup is involved as well. And when I was at Hungry House, there was a line of people waiting right when they were opening at lunchtime. Yeah. It was pretty good. And the food was actually fantastic.
Yeah, the flexibility of the actual space is important. A line for people to pick up, I think, is important. Also, you mentioned, food influencers with followings. I think that's important. I mean, I think maybe Mr. Beast did a little bit of disservice to the broader virtual brand industry, and everyone thought, hey, I can just find a celebrity who's like online. And he's somewhat food adjacent. I think he comes from a family of restaurateurs, but he's definitely not like David Chang, or he's definitely not like Kenji Lopez, right? Like he isn't like this food influencer that has been cooking and developing his following around that. So I think that's important. You just maybe not just go get a rapper and license his name to start a virtual brand.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a line there. You could go like the virtual dining concept is definitely a mix of like different types of celebrities, and some, as you say, are food adjacent, some are not. But like Mariah's cookies, we've got a celebrity who's doing cookies, but what does she know about baking? I don't know. I mean, from my sources tell me that they didn't sell very well through Reef at Christmas time. So I don't know. I just think there are a lot of brands out there. There's a lot to choose from. And like you said, when you open the app, I mean, the beauty about, delivery, it leveled the playing field for everybody, but it also opened up the playing field, right? And so there's so much to choose from now. It's not like we have more consumers buying. I really don't think, I think foot traffic, whether it's online visits or in-store traffic, has remained relatively flat to 1% gain for years, and so you're just having more concepts competing for the same pool of people, as you just said. You
mentioned DoorDash earlier, so I don't think it's just the venture-funded startups. So sometimes it's publicly traded companies that are getting back to core businesses. We had the story break, I think, late last week, early this week, that DoorDash was shuttering Chowbotics. I wrote a story this morning about a company called Pizzemetry. They're actually the company that made the first ever pizza robot. I think some of their patents date back to the 90s, and they're looking for a buyer. Back in April, we heard of Basil Street Pizza, another automated pizza kiosk. They basically are selling off their assets. DoorDash is interesting. Like they've in some cases been buying companies, but they decided to shut down their vending machine concept. Did that seem like a bit of an outlier to you in terms of a business, or did it ever make sense to you that they bought Chowbotics?
I mean, of all the vending machine robots, automated, vending machines out there that I have seen, a lot of those came on 2018, 2019. Sally was her name. Sally from Chowbotics is one of the more popular ones. Now, I've seen a few others as I've traveled through airports that are not the Chowbotics version. So, again, maybe there's others with better tech, but, it was sort of surprising. I think that DoorDash, they do everything by data. Like I've I know a lot about them now, that they don't make any decision without having like proper data. And so buying Chowbotics, even if they wouldn't disclose what it was, I think they said in earnings that it wasn't that minimal of a buy for them. But, they had to have thought that they could do something with it. And they did. They tried to test some virtual brands to use other uses besides salads, right, and bowls. And maybe during their testing after they bought it, they said, this doesn't work, because they were trying to use it not just in airports. I think they were thinking about a use case where restaurants could use it to do a virtual brand within their restaurants. So they could, like an added value to offer up their merchants. So obviously they tested it, didn't work, and they got out of it quickly. So yeah, it's in some ways, the decision to get out quickly based on data makes sense, but wow, like why did they even buy them to begin with?
Yeah, I've seen Farmer's Fridge in a few airports, and that's a little bit of a different concept. I mean, there's the idea of like, hey, we can do automated salad creation, customize it, but that maybe is too complicated, right? Farmer's Fridge just puts these, what looks like fairly artisanally made salads with lots of fresh ingredients in their essentially smart vending machines. They're probably replaced every day or two, and maybe that's enough. Because it seems like Farmer's Fridge is doing well. I don't have an insight into their economics, but it seems like those guys are doing well.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I've seen. I think I've seen that one in Chicago.
Yeah, and that's where they're based.
Okay, well then that makes sense. Yeah.
It seems like on the robotics side, the back of house robots are doing pretty well. Like, we're seeing announcements for the likes of, Picnic, and we're seeing others like the Miso guys continuing to do deals. It seems like maybe we're seeing a little bit of a challenge for the more complicated consumer facing automated vending machines, at least some of them, not all of them. I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but it seems like where maybe there's a little bit of struggle is like the automated kind of smart robotic vending machines.
Yeah, I think automation is finally kind of having its day. This in the last 18 months, probably accelerated, by the pandemic. But I mean, I first saw Penny, the food robot server, right, like you did at the 2018 National Restaurant Association show. And it took like a couple years, 2-3 years before she's, seen a name change, an investment by SoftBank, and then now being rolled out in various, I think they're at Chili's. I think they're in Chili's. And so Chili's is using both food assistant robots. They're using drones, and I think they're going to start using Serve food delivery robots. So they are everywhere. Like I would actually say, there's a lot of people using Flippy. Miso Robotics is in the kitchen. There's an automation happening front of house and back of house, which is exciting. So I think the ones that will succeed are probably the ones that are, augmenting labor, right? Helping with this like labor challenges that restaurants continue to face. And I frankly is happened before the pandemic, and I think that if they can do some of these tasks that are hard to hire for, that's why you're seeing restaurants kind of jump on the certain robotics bandwagon.
I think you're right. That's a great point. Where it is helping a pain point in labor continues to be a pain point for a lot of these. The Servi guys, the Bear Robotics guys, they were one of the first drivers that really brought automation to that front of house, where we know that people are struggling to keep up. It's a challenge to get to the tables, and they had a simple solution. I think their latest offering that it may have been at the National Restaurant Show they showed off was the one that's actually targeted at like multi-level hospitality places like hotels. Like, so you're actually going to see the robot going into the elevator, heading up to your room.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. It's great to see the hotels jumping on, the robotics bandwagon. But I do see, I saw in it, there's a bunch of food robot assistants too. And again, there's a ton out there. I know CPK was testing one in California where I live, in Orange County. But it was a different competitor to Bear Robotics. But yeah, there's many out there. They serve their purpose. They help run food to the table, and then it helps with the bussers, clearing the table. I guess what I didn't know, the Bear Robotics also sings, apparently.
I have not seen
the
that.
Happy Birthday Chili song.
An optional feature.
Yeah.
That's great. I'd love to get your take.
Yeah.
I asked Jordan Thaler last week about it. He was a little bit skeptical. But you're more of you've done more fast casual, more fast food restaurants. What do you think of the Taco Bell concept? I think that they're demoing in Minnesota. I don't know if you've seen that, essentially where they're using the elevators.
Oh, to move up and down to serve?
Yeah. It's to like have 4 drive-through lines and then your food basically comes down in a dumbwaiter.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little over the top even for Taco Bell, and Taco Bell knows, but yeah, I mean, these mobile drive-throughs, which, funny enough, I think Chipotle and started with some of the digital only mobile pickup, drive-throughs with their Chipotlanes. And I remember when Brian Niccol, teased about it when he first started in 2018 at Chipotle. And I thought, is he really going to bring drive-throughs to Chipotle? And sure enough, they did it. And boy, did they look really smart when the pandemic hit, because suddenly it was a great contactless way to pick up your food. And so, yeah, and now you see everybody doing it. Shake Shack, Taco Bell. I think is Panera doing some digital.
Wow, Shake Shack's doing a drive-through. Have you ever ordered a Shake Shack? I feel like the average wait time there is like 20 minutes. I mean, how do they do a drive-through?
Yeah.
How do they do a drive-through?
Again, Danny Wire, Shake Shack is not in Orange County where I live, but there is one in Long Beach, California, where if I time it right, like you can order ahead, and but it's still kind of a long wait to pick up, like once your food is ready, because it's in this crowded like mall in Long Beach. So,
all right,
yeah, they need to do a little better development on that.
Yeah, well, we'll see if Danny can get the Shake Shack to Orange County at some point. Maybe he listens to the podcast.
Yeah.
but if you're, you look at a lot of different restaurant tech, you write about it. What are some areas or some interesting trends you're seeing or that you're excited about?
I mean, I think we haven't talked about it much, but I am excited that, drone delivery is accelerating as well. It seems to be happening not just in restaurants, like in retail. I think Walmart, when you see big players like Walmart experimenting, and again, Chili's, very big casual dining chain, experimenting with drone delivery, that I think that speaks volumes, and they're starting to get the types of permissions, federal permissions they need to go extend from 1 mile to 2 mile delivery. And ultimately, it's something like that is going to reduce the cost for both the restaurant and the consumer, because you're cutting out a big labor expense, and that's a driver. So, and you're able to do more deliveries in a shorter amount of time than a driver can, right? So, yeah, I'm real excited about drone delivery. I think I would like to have some El Pollo Loco dropped in my backyard. How about you?
Yeah. I kind of go back and forth on drone delivery, because I tend to think like the friction and the barriers to get sidewalk robots out there are probably way less. I feel like you're getting the FAA involved and with drone delivery, and I just don't know if it works in dense urban environments. Maybe it works in maybe suburban areas where there's a little bit more distance you have to go. But I think it's really intriguing. I'm just curious how much it'll be used. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's like everything. I think there's not a one size fits all for every location in the U.S. So yeah, I think it solves for the suburban delivery in a speedy, faster way, which is where I live in the suburbs. But in dense neighborhoods, that's where maybe the robots, the rover robots on the sidewalks, if they're not flipped over like the one flashing their red lights like the one in your neighborhood. But yeah, I think we're going to see a little bit of both, right? Wherever it fits, wherever it works best. I mean, hopefully, everybody will figure it out. But the key will be to use automation, hopefully, to help reduce these costs.
And the environmental footprint. I think Surf's tagline, like, why deliver a 2-pound burrito in a 2,000-pound car? I do think it makes sense. And from an environmental footprint, like drones and sidewalk, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and on top of that, it's kind of fun, and we need a little bit of fun. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Nancy. I always enjoy reading your articles. And where can people find out more about you?
Oh, you could find me at Insider. Just click on businessinsider.com is our landing page, and I work for the retail section, so you can just click on retail. But just Google me, Nancy Luna. You should be able to find me.
All right. Look forward to having you back sometime, Nancy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hey, that's it for today's show. Thank you, Nancy Luna, for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you will be back soon. The Spoon Podcast is hosted and produced by me, Michael Wolf. The podcast is part of the Spoon Media Network. If you'd like to connect with us, just head over to the Spoon. You know where we are, or drop us a line at podcast@thespoon.tech. I know we mentioned it before, but if you are going to CES and you want to be involved in the food tech program as an exhibitor or a sponsor of the conference, let us know. We are helping the world's biggest technology conference pull off food tech for the second year in a row, and I think it's going to be absolutely huge this year, so you're going to want to be involved with it. Drop us a line at sponsor@thespoon.tech if you have any questions. All right, that's it for now. We will be back later this week with yet another podcast, and we'll talk to you all soon.